Hi, welcome to class. My name is Don LaFon. This week in our 8 Plus software class, we are covering computer and network security. Extremely important topic at a high level in this course because 8 Plus doesn't get too far into details. Later, when you get into networking, you'll learn more about security for your Net Plus. When you get into um, the security, you'll go deep into security, obviously, and your security plus. And when you get into classes like Cisco, for example, you'll learn about security in those specific pieces of equipment at a much deeper layer. This is just designed as an introduction for those of you that need enough information to get your A plus certification. Many of these topics I could create an entire presentation just on a specific topic, and I have for other courses. For this course, let's go ahead and get started and see what we have for you. Presentation should be about an hour and 15 minutes. I need to move this window over here, and I need to start the presentation. If you are watching this as a recording inside of my Canvas classroom, please ask questions in the help discussion forum, and I'll do my best to answer the questions, and feel free to answer other students' questions. That's awesome when you do. If you're watching this on YouTube, first of all, welcome. Thank you for coming to my class. Appreciate it. Hopefully this information is useful for you earning your A+ certification, and I'd love to hear when you do. Please comment below if you have any questions, and like and subscribe so you can find me easily, and hit the notification button so that you can be notified when I release new videos. Right now I'm working on Cisco 3 videos as I finish up this A+ course. Hardware and software security. The soft skill is building customer trust. We'll talk about security. We'll talk about user education, user groups, and permissions. The soft skill this week is on building consumer trust. So trust begins with professionalism. Be professional in your attire, attitude, written communication, and oral communication. Trust also includes being honest with the customer. If you're going to be late, let the customer know. If you're going to do more research, explain the situation. Don't make up things. If you don't know something, don't tell them, let me do some additional research, and then do that research and make sure to follow up when you tell a client that you're going to follow up. Sometimes clients are sitting there waiting. You said you were going to get them additional information and you haven't, and they're waiting and they're waiting and they're waiting. Make sure you follow up when you promise to do something for a client. Trust also involves being honest. If you find confidential material, do not use or discuss any material you see while in a customer area. If you see confidential material, let the customer know you have seen the material. If the material is a password, let them know and recommend that they change the password immediately. Do not touch or move things or papers in a customer's area. Always ask the customer to move or put things away to clear your area if you need more space to work on the project that you're currently working on. Do not try to work around a mess. Simply explain that you need space to determine and or repair the problem. Trust involves giving customers documentation related to the project just installed or replaced. Ensure they know what was changed, what uh, how to use whatever it is that you changed, and make sure they have a way to follow up if there's something that you've changed that they may need additional help with. For example, you install a new printer, show them how to use the printer. You install a new type of mouse, show them what the mouse buttons use or what they use. You install a webcam, show them how to turn it on, what software to use, how to record a presentation, for example. Trust involves doing what you say you will do. Trust also involves being honest about billing. Security policy. Management must define and make clear what is acceptable to put on a corporate wired or wireless network, and also what is acceptable along with the consequences for doing so. A security policy is one or more documents that provides these rules and guidelines related to computer and network security. Common elements of a security policy include physical access, antivirus, acceptable use, passwords, email usage, remote access, and emergency procedures. Some of these are obvious, and others we'll talk about as we move through this presentation. Physical security. Typical physical security involves door locks, cipher locks, keys, guards, and fences, but physical security regarding computers means much more. Electronic key cards are part of an access control system, which includes the key cards, door readers, and software to control and monitor a system. This is just one example. In today's networks, including in today's classrooms and businesses as well, the old traditional physical key that opened an office is going by the wayside. Not one of my classrooms still has a key that I can use to open it, but it also has a touch key right above it to open that. No, I don't think it does. It just has a physical key. The rest of my uh, office, my classroom, all have a keypad that I either type in a code or I use my access card to open. Same thing they use works the same way on in a hotel in today's world. When you check into a hotel, they don't give you a physical key anymore. They give you an access key. And the reason why they do that instead of the old physical key, first of all, physical keys are easy to duplicate. And they don't want a bunch of duplicate keys roaming around when employees switch jobs or lose their job. So they'd have to change out the locks because the keys could have been reproduced. These digital keys can be turned off or turned back on again, just like they do in a hotel. And they can not only be changed for the lock, but they can also keep track of who actually used the key based on who should have the key at what time they used it to access the equipment. So it's an awesome way to keep track of um, access to secure spaces, for example. And when something happens, you can go look for who was in the room. Physical security devices include smart cards, key fobs. Hang on just a second. Okay, let me start this slide again. Physical security devices. In addition to that digital key that's red, you might also have a smart card, key fob, RFIDs, badge readers, security guards, security tokens, types of security tokens, authentication tokens, USB tokens, hardware tokens, software tokens, and door locks. So I've actually had the hardware token that you see on the right-hand side or some version of it. Today, they use smartphones to determine the token. Ultimately, you need your sign-in and password. And then on top of that, you need to have the code that's on the hard token. RFIDs are usually implanted in a piece of equipment or in a store, for example, for inventory. You can't just walk out through the front door with something with an RFID in it, sets off the alarms. That RFID has to be removed from the piece of equipment. Key fobs are used for access. They could also have the token. By the way, that token changes every so many seconds. The Google Authenticator is a good example of the authenticator on smartphones. That Google Authenticator, I'm finding more and more websites need me to use the code on my Google Authenticator to be able to access the website itself. Physical security devices include entry control roster, determining if somebody's actually at the door controlling who can come in. You have a list of names of who's allowed. Biometric locks, you use your fingerprint, your eye to something on your body to be read. TPM, we'll talk about a little later. Cable locks, server locks, USB locks, and this is actually a picture of a man trap. A man trap if used properly, you should never have somebody else in the middle with you. You open this door, you go into the space, you shut that door, then you open this door and you move on. What the man trap is geared to do is stop somebody from piggybacking. Piggybacking is somebody just walks in right after you do before you get a chance to let the door close. It becomes really awkward when somebody you're not sure has access to the space walks in right after you, and you're like, oh, I guess they must belong here, and you leave them there, not knowing that they had no right to be in that space. Physical security devices include maybe having a privacy screen, maybe the monitor itself has a built-in feature that makes it hard to read from anybody that's not directly in front of it, or it could be like a screen that goes on a window at your home, except this kind of screen, it doesn't block your view of the data when you're looking straight on, but it stops everybody from looking from different directions. You might also have a tracking module that keeps track of where the device is. If the device gets lost or stolen, you're able to determine where it is. Much like your smartphone has the ability to be tracked when it goes missing. Document security, keep secure. Obviously, secure. Make sure you put away any documents that you must keep in secure locked cabinets and drawers. Shred anything that is ready to be disposed of. Get a certificate of destruction indicating that you have the authority to destroy the material, and we also have proof of incineration after you dispose of it. Get proof that you disposed of it. Indicate, for example, at the college I work at, every now and then the shredding truck comes to the space. We have to. It's a trusted organization, and we have to mark all boxes. What type of information is in there? Not what is in there, but if it's secure, secret, company secret, whatever, we have to indicate what it is, what type of secure, and how to dispose of it. And then we get a receipt saying that the data of emailed receipt, once the data is destroyed, we get an email receipt indicating that the data has been destroyed. Be aware of dumpster diving. Even if you shred a document, if somebody wants to take the time and the patience to unshred that document, it is possible, depending on the shredded level. So make sure you're not shredding super secret or any kind of secret information and just putting it out in the trash. Somebody may be willing to spend the hours it would take to put that information back together again. Authentication, proving who someone or a device is by using something the user or device has, knows, or is located. Can also be something a person is. So, for example, that's a mouthful. You try reading it. For example, user authentication strong passwords. So, a method of ensuring the person accessing the device or network is a person who is allowed to do so. We talk about password strength a little bit later. Single factor authentication, that's just username and password. Multi-factor authentication means that you not only have the username and password, but you have one or more digital methods to verify the identity of the person using the device or network resources. Software tokens that I talked about earlier is an example, and so is authentication apps like Google Authenticator is just one. Ultimately, you have to put the username and password in, and then you also have to verify it. I love my current email service that I use. Every time I sign into my email from a different device, it sends an email to my email indicating, is this you that's signing in, before it allows me to sign in. It allows, it can come to my phone, it can go to a different email that is trusted, And ultimately, I can tell if somebody's trying to hack into my email. Authentication, there are two server technologies used with authentication, Radius and TACACS. Radius is a centralized authentication, authorization, and accounting. That's the AAA that you're going to hear over and over and over and over again in security. AAA is authentication, authorization, and accounting. This will let you know what those are now. Authorization is that password you need to get into the equipment. I'm sorry, that's authentication. Authorization, I'm sorry, let me repeat. Authentication is that password authenticating you are who you say you are. Authorization is what you are authorized to do once you're in the network, and accounting is what you actually did when you were in the account, in the equipment. That's AAA, and you need to know what each one of those are, plus what each of the letter A's stand for. TACAT supports AAA or just one of these functions. And both of them are remote servers, so they're just examples of you signing into your equipment. You put a password, username and password in there. It is bounced off of the Radius server. The Radius server verifies that you are who you are, and then it returns access or no access. It also keeps track of your what you did while you're on the account. Right, 1 second. Biometrics. Biometrics are more secure because a biometric system is more difficult to bypass than a username, ID, and password. Biometrics require that the person being authenticated is present when gaining access. Example of biometric devices used to allow someone to gain access to a room, a locker, or device include fingerprint reader, facial recognition, hand scanner, retinal scanner, and voice recognition. Heck, even getting into one of the parks here in Florida, you need to put your hand in the meter, and it's the hand. It reads the hand dimensions, and that's what lets you in, not a fingerprint, because that can be fake, but your actual size of your hand when you're checking in. Of course, I'm not sure what they do when you grow, if you're a child, when you first go and then you go back years later, but it is the way one of the amusement parks in Florida allows you into the park. So it is a form of biometric device. Logical security just it means that it's using logic, which is ones and zeros, basically using software. Antivirus and anti-malware software to protect the operating system and applications from small programs that wreak havoc on the system, even causing it not to work at all. We'll talk about different viruses and worms and Trojan horses in a little bit. Firewall, hardware device that protects an organization or software available through the operating system. Oh, I'm sorry. The firewall can be hardware or software. It does the same thing. It blocks the world from seeing the private nature of your network. The firewall has, for example, in the simplest form, it has a global address on one side and all the private addresses on the other. Of course, firewalls can be much more in depth than that. But that is an example of, say, your home network. You have a firewall, it's your router, and you have private addressing behind for all of your devices, and you have a global address that you communicate with your ISP, and then the ISP the internet service provider will take care of anything that is not on your network once you send out to that default gateway. User authentication, strong passwords is highly needed for logical security, but we've already talked about other options like multi-factor authentication. Here's an example. You not only put in your username and password, but you get an email message to your phone asking if you're trying to sign in on that strange device. And vice versa. If you were going on your phone to a place you haven't been before, then you'd have to go to a computer to verify that it is you on your phone trying to sign in. Directory permissions can be assigned to differentiate between people. that just need to see the data or those that need to change or even delete the data. As you are hired into a company, your directory permissions will be set. We see that a little bit later in this presentation. And then and they can be changed. The network administrator will change your directory permissions once you change jobs, for example, or as you need different permissions, they will be changed. And then change back later, maybe. Virtual private network, a method of secure connectivity across unsecure networks, such as the internet to a remote location. You can have a VPN for an entire company that connects to an entire different location for that company, and everything from goes through the VPN to get to the other device. Or you can just have a VPN that, say, protects your private address from even the ISP when you go through a virtual private network to access the internet. Even your ISP doesn't know where you go because you're going through a different IP address. Data loss prevention, DLP, protects corporate data from being sent outside of the corporate network. Disabling ports. Computer ports are disabled so that an external device cannot be attacked, and data transfer. It is attacked in a way and attached. What they're talking about there is if somebody has access to your network room or network closet and brings a laptop along, they could take a console cable and they can connect it to the console port on the back of a switch. They can connect a device such as a computer to a port on the front of the device. That same laptop, you connect to a port on the front. And ultimately, depending on your network, they could start a hacking into your network based on either the console cable in the back or the physical port on the front. They don't belong there. So you should have proper security features enabled on those ports. If there's nothing connected to it, just bringing the port down is enough because they can't bring it up just by connecting a device to it. The console cable should have the console port on the back where you initially configure your switch or your router. It should have a password on that console port, stopping somebody from just connecting to the back of the laptop and then disconnecting or turning off the security on the front, and then they're off and running. So you will learn more about security if you go into networking when you get to the equipment. For now, just know you can disable ports. You can use access control lists. There's security rules that permit or deny the type of traffic flowing into the device, out of the device, toward a particular network, or specifying the type of traffic, such as HTTP or HTTPS. A good example of this would be at your work, you could have a HR department, you could have the IT department, you could have what's another HR and IT and sales. So those three departments, you don't want them accessing each other's resources, probably. You don't want the techs in IT changing how much they get paid in HR. You don't want HR knowing how much the salespeople get. I guess they know, but you want the techs knowing how much sales makes. So that you want to separate those. And so ultimately you can use an ACL to determine who can get where. You can also use an ACL to block certain ports. And for example, you can stop somebody from going to Netflix and control where they can get online. Port security detects when an authorized device is plugged into a corporate network. So when I tried to bring up one of the computers in my classroom by taking the network connection from one working computer and connecting it to a non-working computer, absolutely nothing happened. I was not able to get off, and that port was actually locked because when I put it back on the computer that was working, it no longer worked. So the IT department had put security set that if anybody plugs an unauthorized device into the network using that port, maybe on a laptop or for example, not knowing that I would be trying to get another computer in the room to work, but let's say a laptop tried to connect, they would shut down the port. Now they have to I found out that it was set by IT because they contacted me and they said, "Hey, you've been messing around with the computers in your room because somebody connected a different MAC address from a different." They can tell what MAC address was actually connected based on what was recorded in the syslog messages when when I made the switch, and they knew it was a different computer, but it wasn't authorized to put a second computer in there. You'll learn more when you get to Cisco if this is what you do for a career. But anyways, they didn't mind. They just said you can't do that. And I said, yeah, I figured that out. And then they just remotely turned that first computer on. Continuing with logical security, email filtering, security rules specific to email that processes incoming messages for putting into specific users' email inboxes that search for and remove suspicious or harmful emails. Wow, that's a lot of words there. Basically, what it's doing is it's taking the incoming email and it is blocking the items that it does know doesn't belong because there are services that the college subscribe to that give email that is known. They call them blacklists of email addresses. They just block all that. And so before putting it into the specific user's email box, it's blocked. You don't even see it. Sometimes you can go to junk mail and see it, but not. But back in the day when I first started using computers back in the 80s, we got all sorts of junk in our emails, some that was scary to open. Let's just say not safe for work email that was not asked for, but just sent to us randomly, and it was very inappropriate. That's all been taken care of for the most part using email filtering. It also can control email that you send out as well, but not so much. I get freedom to send out, but mainly from what it comes into my inbox. There's actually a service that pops up saying these few emails we weren't sure about, are any of these suspicious or harmful? And then I can say, yes, this is good, or no, that one's fine, release that one. And then I don't know what that other one is, and they can delete it and block it from that point on. Trusted, untrusted software sources. Windows users commonly have security software that tells them whether a website or downloaded file is trusted or untrusted software based on its source. Linux users have repositories of open source software that have been approved and listed on specific Linux platforms, stopping you from installing Linux distros that are not authorized by your company. Biosecurity settings, you can set a password at several different layers. You can set it for the obviously just when you get to the Windows operating system, but you can set a password on boot and power on as well. Not the Windows password, but when you first turn on your computer, you have to have a password. You can also have a password that is set for admin, meaning that only the admins are able to change anything on that operating system. And you can also set a password that will you have to have before you can even turn on the equipment. LoJack is a software module, if you will, that's installed in the software. It's hard to find if you are not looking for it. And what it does is it secretly keeps track of where the laptop is. If you have a tile, for example, on my phone, my phone and my wallet, I have a tile on it, and that tile does the same exact thing. It tells me where my wallet is, and I've actually used it. I've lost it. And my tile, I went to the computer told me where my wallet was. It was a really strange place that I probably would never have found it. Not in my home. It was outside of my home. not at my work. It was left someplace, but it was able to be found. Now, LoJack, it's not just where you leave something, but if it's stolen, you can track it, much like cars have the similar feature. My Tesla, for example, I can call Tesla and find out exactly where my car is. And they'll tell me, they'll even turn it off so that the person that stole my car can't use it anymore. Trusted platform module ultimately encrypts everything on your hard drive, and that TPM has to be available on the computer. Otherwise, the hard drive, for example, cannot be read. I had a student in a class once that came to me and she said, "Hey, I took a hard drive out of my computer and I put it in another computer and it can't be read. What's going on?" And we identified that the laptop that she took it out of had TPM enabled, and only that laptop can read that device. Unfortunately, that laptop had broken. That's why she took the hard drive out of the laptop. So if your equipment is stolen, then that TPM module, if they try to take the disassemble it and get to the hard drive without using the right kind of password through the operating system, then the TPM will block them from reading the data, even if they have the equipment. The top level, just in the supervisor and user, you have access to some features, and admin has access to others. That's all that they're talking about there. So here's some ideas for password security. First of all, don't write it down and put it in an obvious place. But don't write it down at all. I do a little tutoring on the side, and I had a client that I went to her house, and when I asked her what a password is for something that she was doing, she reached into the top drawer of her desk and she pulled out a little wheeled notebook, and she had all the passwords to everything that she had needed a password to, all written on that notebook, and left it in that top drawer. Told her that wasn't a good idea. If somebody ever was at her home and at her computer, that's the first place they would look. She put it in her bedroom from that point on, but I'm still thinking writing them down isn't a good idea. Keeping it digital through an app or an encrypted file, that's probably a better idea. But of course, if you lose your computer for any reason, it breaks or somebody steals it, now that password is now on that encrypted file on the computer that they have stolen, and they might be able to access it. There's got to be a way for you to keep track of your passwords using one of the password apps that keeps passwords remotely, so that you can access those passwords even if your equipment's not working. Number of characters complexity, 8 or more characters. Today they recommend 10. Use upper and lowercase. Numbers and special characters also encouraged. Format. Oh, by the way, you'd be surprised the difficulty level between 8 characters and 10 characters. It's a huge difference when it comes to somebody trying to hack that password with brute force. Format, don't use consecutive numbers or letters. Dictionary tags can be used. Dictionary just goes through all of the dictionary words with a series of numbers afterwards. Really easy first thing that brute force does, a dictionary attack, because you're probably using words, right? Now, if you're using a word like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with your name after it, or your name and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, super easy to break into. Because ultimately, the person that hacks into your system is probably going to use some sort of um, what do they call it? What is it called? Hang on a second. Social engineering. So somebody trying to hack, if they're actively trying to hack into your equipment, they're going to know who owns the domain. For example, if this is a company, they're going to know who owns the domain. They're going to Google who works at the company, so they're going to have your name. They're going to then use social media to social engineer as much information as possible for you, and they're going to enter that information in uh, the attack, the brute force attack, to limit the possibilities or to to try to make it a little bit faster. The more information they can find out about you online, who your mother is, where you live, where you've lived in the past, um, what company you work at now, where you've worked in the past, your dog's name, right? Ultimately, we put all that stuff on social media, and if somebody's trying to hack into our account, they can find out what your dog's name is. And if you're using your dog's name and a number after it, guess what? That's an easy one to be hacked. So please don't use your dog's name in your password. Expiration, minimum time a user must keep a password before changing it, usually 2-3 months or less, depending on the security nature of the company you work for. And then a maximum time before requiring a change. That is, it'll start warning you about the password it must be changed in 2 weeks, and then 11 at my company at least. Then it says 13 days, and 12 days, and 10 days, all the way down to 5 days, and then it just when it gets if I don't change my password, it just locks me out of my account. Reuse, often a password security policy does not allow reuse. That's because older passwords can be hacked even when you're not using it, and then your brute force can use older passwords. Security saver, screensaver lock computer went away from the desk, so you walk away after a certain period of time, it locks the computer automatically. You want that. That way, so even somebody like a student, you don't want to leave your email open on your desktop or your homework assignments open and have somebody come along and do something to them. Failed attempts, how many times a person is allowed to try a password? 5 or 7 or 9 times, never 9 times. It's 5 or 7, maybe 3. 3 is a little irritating because I can tell you 3 times. I've tried my password 3 times and made a mistake each time, and then I'm locked out for 30 seconds. That's not fun. 5 minutes, I can usually figure it out. Or 5 attempts in 3 minutes. I'll give you that. Social, don't type a password when somebody is near. So be aware who's around you, and you don't know why they would want to pass your password, but just be careful. And if you have to start typing, just type an incorrect password and then ultimately back out of it when they look away. User education. Educating users is a great way to prevent security events and issues. Training should start when someone is first hired. New hires should be presented with the acceptable use policy, the AUP, previously described. Users should be reminded that every employee is required to follow corporate end user policies and apply security best practices even when devices used to perform business tasks. With every device used to perform business tasks, users should be reminded that if their computer is remotely accessed by a technician, they should close Windows after that they have open that has corporate or personal information prior to agreeing to the remote connection. Anytime that a technician removes a virus or malware from a user device, training should be part of solving the problem. Okay, so I just want to point out one thing that my business, the college I teach at, does that I really like. They send junk mail to intentionally virus um, software that looks like it's fine, but in reality, it's phishing software, or it contains a link to a file that ultimately could have been a virus. And what they do is when you click on that file, or when you respond to, or you click on the file to download, or you click on the link to go to another website, it says, do you think this is a legitimate website? And you respond yes or no. When you click yes, it takes you to the place and it says, good job. If you click on a link that they have planted, and they say, nope, not safe, you just infected the entire college's network with opening a file that has a virus. Ultimately, that happens. At the college that I teach at, or I previously taught at, they actually had one of those spreading, we'll talk about it in a little while, one of the viruses that encrypt your data and then they ransom. It's called ransomware. They actually had a ransomware that was spreading quickly. They shut down the entire network. They ultimately figured out it was one person and his own personal email that clicked on a link and opened the file, and it spread fast. Ultimately, they were able to stop it by wiping every computer in the college and then reinstalling from a backup. We'll talk about backups a little bit later as well. But obviously, having a backup of all your content that's separate from your any software that's connected to your network is important to avoid getting hacked with something that is ransomware. Licensing. Digital rights management, DRM, is the technology used to implement controls placed on digital media. It stops you, from example, from recording a movie. When you go to try, if you've ever tried, it'll block you. You'll record nothing if you have DRM enabled on your devices. And most current computers do. Technicians must maintain their professionalism and ethics to ensure that corporate interests are protected. Do not download and try to install any software that you think may have been pirated or protected in any way. First of all, it's illegal, right? And you can get your company in big trouble. Back in the day, when I was in the Navy in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, I'm not putting on anybody on report right now. I'm just saying, back in the day, we used to have I told you about passwords under keyboards. That was a normal thing, and everybody did it. But we also had like 5 copies of Microsoft Office on the entire ship. 300 people, maybe 50 computers spread throughout the ship, and there was 5 copies of the software, and everybody just shared that software. Now, back then, it didn't seem to be a problem. Obviously, it was a problem. If that ship had ever been identified by Microsoft, having software that was plagiarized, copied without permission, without a license, then that ship, if it would have happened today, that ship would be fined hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that definitely cuts back on installing anything that you do not own a license to on a business computer. Don't do it. You'll get in trouble, and your corporation can get in trouble as well. You can get software from different sources. Open source, original software code is provided. Get permission. Believe it or not, Firefox, the browser, is open source software. It doesn't mean it's bad. Open source doesn't mean it's bad. And it doesn't mean it doesn't belong on a corporate computer. Just make sure you get permission from anybody, not anybody. Get permission from the important people before loading open source or freeware or shareware. Make sure you have a commercial license, at least a personal license for the software that you personally use on your computer at home. And if you're able to install it on multiple computers and you get permission to install it on your work computer, you need the license that you paid for that version of the software on your work computer. Freeware doesn't cost anything, but could include harmful software. Shareware might be free at first, but then required to later make a payment. May include only part of the software. If you download software, say from a website like a torrent, that torrent could have background software that also installs with the legitimate software that you're downloading, and that background software could make you susceptible to be a zombie in a DDoS attack. Now, we cover that when we talk about viruses. Regulated data. Well, there's plenty of organizations that their responsibility is to make sure that the software is paid for, and you have the proper licensing for it through federal law. Types of regulated data include personal identify, and hard for me to say, personally identifiably. Yep, that's it. Information, personally identifiably information. It's basically information that uniquely identifies you, like your social security, your employer ID, your patient number, maybe a user ID. Those are that's considered PII, and it is controlled by law. And companies get into big trouble if they accidentally lose social security number and client information out to the web. If they're hacked and hundreds of thousands of records go out, they get in trouble and they can be fined. PCI, payment card information. You've heard of payment card scanners put on gas stations, possibly. You scan, it gives you the gas. Later, that card's used by other people. Basically, when you put your card in, it's scanned, and then somebody has access to it. When it comes to regulation, that payment card information is super important. All payment records are important. You can't get hacked. That information gets hacked, and that company is really in big trouble. GDPR, European General Data Protection Regulation. Anyone that offers goods or services to residents of the EU must comply. And then protected health information. Health information explicitly must be maintained secret. Nobody should be able to see it or open it unless they have access to it, like your doctor. Nobody else should have access to that information. And it's your job as a security professional to make sure that all of these, your PII, your PCI, your PHI, all of them are protected. Security threats. Malware is software code that is designed to damage a computer system. Types of malware include spyware, collects personal information, and then uses it for other reasons. Maybe just sell you something, maybe worse. Viruses do something harmful to your computer. I once downloaded a program onto my computer that looked safe. I downloaded it. First thing it did was, I'm not going to tell you the program, but it was, I had the program on my computer and I went to get an update and it was Program Pro. And I was like, oh, I'll get the pro version of this program. I like this program. So I downloaded pro version, and pro version ended up with a virus, being a virus. And the pro version told me to uninstall the unpro to be able to install the pro. And to me, that just made perfect sense. Obviously, they want me to understand the unprofessional whatever. So I uninstalled a perfectly good software and installed the pro version, which was nothing less than the Windows 32 virus that encrypted put a virus in the boot record of my hard drive, and ultimately I had to throw that hard drive away. Even low-level formatting of that drive did not remove the virus. It was an awful virus. I'm really careful online now. Of course, now I say, give me some wood I can knock on, right? Worm spreads to other devices on its own. That's what makes it unique. Trojans disguises itself as a legitimate program. I remember in Facebook once, I clicked on a picture because I thought it was interesting and said, click on picture to learn more. The next window opened up, looked like I was still on Facebook. It said, enter your username and password. I thought I was just in Facebook. Why is it not seeing my username and password? So I went ahead and entered it again. Then I got a error 404. At that point, I knew something was up. And sure enough, shortly later, I found out from my Facebook friends that my network was hacked and that somebody was using my network to spread more viruses and Trojans and worms, and yeah, it was bad. So I just changed my password and then I was up and running again, but it's not always that easy. A Trojan pretends to be something else, and in this case, it did trick me. Malware, a rootkit. Now, rootkits are used by many people to replace the operating system, but it can be used in a malicious way to gain access to the operating system to do something that's not authorized. I want to be clear. Generally speaking, if you're using a rootkit to replace an operating system on a phone, for example, you're probably getting rid of you're losing your warranty on that phone and probably not doing, especially if it's Apple. If you can find a rootkit to Apple, you need to not use it because you're going to probably go against some user permission policy that says you can't do it. Ransomware, I already mentioned, requires users to pay money to gain access to a computer, regain it. I told you about the college and how they had to format everything everywhere to get rid of the ransomware, which was quickly spreading. And then they used a backup to restore. It was an entire day process. We couldn't use our computers for the entire day while the IT worked to replace every computer. Because if one computer wasn't wiped, then that one computer would spread the virus again. Keyloggers records every keystroke, can be software loaded locally by something like a USB drive. They load the keylogger, then everything you type on that keyboard is then recorded to the USB drive. It can also be software that's loaded without you knowing, or maybe with a torrent that I told you about earlier, and then it's accessed later. But my experience is with a USB drive, and then everything is offloaded to the USB drive, and then the person just comes by and picks up that USB drive. Hard to detect because that USB drive can be connected to the back of the keyboard. I'm sorry, the back of the computer in a USB port that's not used. And that's one reason, by the way, to turn off USB ports. It's not used, it's not liked by many, but at least turn off the USB ports on the back of the computer that users should not be accessing anyways. A botnet, we talked about zombies earlier with the DDoS attack, and we talked about how loading a software in the background that allows for a remote desktop or just remote access to that computer, and then the bad guy, not you, you don't even know that the bad guy is attacking a service with your computer. You're the zombie, and a bad guy is using your computer as part of a botnet to hack a big corporation, maybe even your own corporation. Social engineering, I threw out that term earlier, tricking people into divulging personal or corporate information. Impersonalization, what they mean there is they might say they're somebody. So for example, let's say the bad guy finds out who is the IT manager at a company, and then he calls the secretary and he says, "Hey, it's me. I'm away from the office, and I've for some reason I can't get in. My username and password don't seem to be working. Can you give me my password?" And then ultimately, that password, the secretary, the new secretary, says, "Sure, I'll give it to you." She gives you a password. I was surprised just today getting on Pearson VUE. I'm not putting them under the table, but just today talking to Pearson VUE to set up an exam. While talking to her, ultimately she gave me over the phone. She gave me a new username and the password for that username because I kept telling her it wasn't working because it wasn't working. So she gave me a new user and she said, "Here, type this. Okay, and here's your password. Type this." And I typed it in there and I got on. I'm a good guy. She actually changed my username for my Pearson VUE account and the password. She gave me a new one, which I then changed. But ultimately, I was shocked that somebody over the phone, even to this day, will give you a username and password that ultimately only gave me access to schedule an exam and pay for it. I doubt if anybody's going to be scheduling exams and paying for them for me or under my access, but who knows what else that has access to? All the previous exams I have, maybe. Anyways, people can be impersonate. So be aware that's where company training comes into play. Shoulder surfing, be aware people can stand over your shoulder and read little bits, even if you're just on Facebook, which you should not be doing at work. But maybe you're on a break and you jump on Facebook and they're so interested in what you're doing on Facebook. Who knows what information they're seeing? They're seeing your pet name, for example. And if your pet name is your password, guess what? Now they know how to get onto your account. They're looking at your family names because they're looking at family demographics, uncles and aunts. "Oh, you have somebody who lives in Rhode Island. Oh yeah, My mom. Oh, your mom lives in Rhode Island. Well, now they have something to go on to look for information about my mom in Rhode Island, right? So be aware of shoulder surfing, uh, and dumpster diving still can happen. Be careful what you put in the trash can, because somebody could still basically jump in your trash and start looking through it at a company or at your home. Tailgating and piggybacking. I showed you tailgating earlier. No, piggybacking, I showed you. Basically, when an unauthorized person follows you into a place where you're authorized to go, but they're not, and you don't want to say something to them, say something to them, right? It's your job to protect your equipment. Say, hey, you can't follow me in here. Oh, I don't have my pass. It's like, well, you need to get your pass replaced because I'm not allowed to let you follow me in here. Oh, I'm going to get you fired for this. Well, I'd rather be put on the pad for not letting you in than letting somebody in that is unauthorized. And if they keep persisting, you need to back out and not go through that second door. Phishing, pronounced like it sounds, phishing. Well, I guess it's not spelled like that. Well, it is. Anyways, attempts to get info via email, spear phishing, attempts to get your info, attempts to get info with some information provided about you. So they'll reach out to you'll get this. I get this all the time on my phone today, uh, in today's world. I get somebody that says, "Hey, Donald, or do you still sell real estate in Jacksonville?" And I say, "Yes. How can I help you?" And ultimately, they start going down this path where I can tell right away that they're not really interested in me helping them buy or sell a house. They're interested in getting information about me that they can later use against me, to hack into my account or hack into my network, or just to somehow get me to give them money. But they know some information that's readily available online. They get that information and then they try to use it to get more information. Security attacks. Security attacks come from outside or from within the network. Types of attacks include access attacks, backdoor attacks, botnets, we talked about already, brute force, basically just pounding away at your password until they finally guess it. They don't do it. Usually it's a software program that does it. Dictionary attack. DOS is where one person's trying to provide a denial of service. DDoS is where you have a bunch of zombies being controlled by someone to bring down a network. Man in the middle, that's where you have divulged some information and somebody has, perhaps even as simple as a ARP request. And so there's a man in the middle that's using ARP spoofing. ARP is where it's trying to find the IP address. Somebody just says, "Hey, I I'm that person," and then they say, "Oh, okay," and so everything goes through that man in the middle, and then they pass it on to the real default gateway, and the default gateway passes it back to them because that's where they got it from, and so that person gets all of the information. That's just an example of a man in the middle. There's lots of ways to do it. Rainbow table, reconnaissance, talked about that earlier. A rainbow table is when a software program tries to actually hack the hash. Now, we're not getting into hashes in this program, but this presentation, or in this class, or in the A+ certification. But a hash is a encrypted or an encrypted table of 512, 1024, 2048 characters that represents the actual information. And the rainbow table ultimately just uses a mechanism, a software program that tries to hack the hash. And in cases, depending on how deep the level of encryption you have, 512 is easier to crack than 1024, which is easier than 2048. Reconnaissance, we talked about already. Replay, just what replay is okay. I added a picture for what a replay attack is. Basically, just the sender sending an email, for example, and that email being being received by a third party, that third party unauthorized then uses the information to get the receiver to do something that the third party wants. Ultimately, just resending the email, replaying it to basically have the receiver reply, I thought I sent this to you already, and then they respond with whatever you asked for, and you get that information. Smurf, that's a term. Okay, I moved Smurf to DDoS because it's a type of DDoS. Basically, using a small program that ultimately creates a big problem in the network when it comes to DDoS. It's the name of a program that's used for DDoS attacks. Then they talk about spoofing. It's basically, I mentioned that earlier when I was talking about man in the middle, basically pretending you're someone else. TCP/IP hijacking, basically, for example, it could be DHCP spoofing, hijacking, where it starts handing out addresses, and then that creates a problem because the addresses that the threat actor's DHCP server is handing out are not valid addresses. So it creates a problem in the network. Vulnerability scanner, that's actually used by you to look for vulnerabilities if you're doing pen testing, but it also could be used by the bad guy that's trying to figure out what vulnerabilities you have. They can see, for example, what ports are open, and then they can see ultimately if there's what software version you're running, and then they can look on a table, they can determine what vulnerabilities exist for that software that you have running with the version you currently have running, and that can help the bad guy to determine how to try to break into your system. It also, by the way, is used by white hat hackers, people you hire to find problems with your network, vulnerabilities within your network. They will do the same thing, and they'll let you know what you need to do to protect yourself or harden your equipment so that if somebody does do a vulnerability scan on your equipment, they won't find anything to actually try to attack. And zero day, I mentioned earlier, zero day being unknown threats that are not have not been released yet because we don't even know they exist yet. They're out there in every single software, every piece of equipment we have. There's something that is vulnerable, and there are plenty of bad actors around the world trying to crack those find those vulnerabilities and find a way to crack them. So zero day just means the first time that vulnerability has been exploited by a bad guy, and then everybody scrambles to find a patch to solve that problem. A lot of terms there. Make sure any term that you don't understand, you look up to make sure you understand it before you go into the A+ certification. Work groups and domains. Now, ultimately, you can connect computers together in Windows 7, Windows 8, and early versions of Windows 10. Later versions of Windows 10 and Windows 11 do not have work groups. And so ultimately, this will probably go, I'm thinking it may go away for the next certification exam in 2023. Ultimately, you can connect computers in the older versions of Windows operating system, where each computer maintains its own network resources. A domain, on the other hand, is used in a medium or large company where the servers are used to authenticate users. Now, the reason why we probably have a domain servers using well, we'll get to it. Let's just wait till we get to the slide, because ultimately you need to protect your computer. You need to make sure, even if it's your home computer, authentication must be used to determine what network resources a user can access, and that's the home group, work group. Authorization is part of the operating system or network controls that grant access to specific resources such as files, folders, printers, video conferencing equipment, scanners, and so on a computer system or network. Whether you got a work group or you have Active Directory running on your network, both do the same thing, controls what is shared. Now, in Windows, I already talked about a little bit about this. The user, that's um, the you are actually okay. So the administrator, as a user, has total control of the computer. Best practice is to rename the account and password to protect it. Create another user account that belongs to the administrator group that has a complex password. So what I've seen at my college is each person in the IT department has administrative privileges, and they have access to do specific things. By having their own access, their own administrator access with their own username and password, you can control what they can do, and you can also see where they've been. So, for example, maybe you don't want everybody having access to change the president's password and sign-in name, or you don't want everybody to have access access the president's hard drive, right? So there are some things, or HR's hard drive, right? There's some things you don't want even the IT department to be able to have full control over. Now, as a group, a user account has been created and placed in the group that has total control over the computer. So the administrative groups has users in it. Just like there's a guest user, it's a member of the guest group, disabled by default, no default user rights. And then there's a group that has all of the guest users used by those that do not have access to the computer, normally does not require a password. So best practice is to disable. We do I've seen it used before, guest users for a program I teach in the summer where everybody had a guest access using a specific user. Everybody in the room. So I had, I don't know, 60 students, and they all used the same access to get on. That is not a good policy by the fact that you don't know who's doing what in that user group. But it was convenient and easy, and all they had access to was one Canvas class, and they didn't have access to anything else. So it wasn't too bad. And then that user, whatever was created, that guest user was added to the guest user group. Standard user, that would be you or I. Default type of account created when you create a common corporate staff worker. The user is required to request an administrator to make any changes to hardware, software, or security settings. I remember once they changed the software on my work computer, and I remember calling IT and saying, "Hey, I want to change the background picture. I don't like this college logo thing. I want to go back to my fun background." And they said, "Sorry, we don't allow that anymore." And sure enough, I was never able to figure out a way, and I couldn't figure out a way because I was just a standard user in my own standard user group, and I didn't have access to change the password. They probably could have changed the password. I'm sorry, the background. They probably could have changed the background, but their policy was that we're all going to have the same background. I didn't like it at first, but it makes a lot of sense. Much more professional to come into my workspace and see the college logo than it was a picture of my dogs. But I liked a picture of my dogs on my background. Anyways, a backup operators group can back up and restore files and folders regardless of permissions assigned, cannot change security settings, can access the computer from remote locations. Power users, same as standard user, but they can change things like time zone and date. And then the users group can perform common tasks and create local groups, but cannot share files or printers. And the users are obviously in the users group. More. Remote desktop users group can log into the computer from a remote location. Offer remote assistance helper group can use remote assistance program to help users. They're the IT people that can that can log onto your computer to just fix the problem instead of walking you through the steps to fix the problem. I even find that helpful when they tell me that it's not what they say. When I tell them it's not what they say it is, and they say, yes, it is. I say, well, just log into my computer and you'll see. Network configuration operators can make TCP IP changes and release new IP addresses. And the performance log users group can manage local and remote performance logs and alerts. Now, I really should have showed you this picture first because these are the groups. This is Active Directory. You are going to, this is just touching the way networks control who can do what. And you can be a member of multiple groups. That's not a problem. And people are placed into one or more groups for administrative and security, such as controlling logins. Now, I just want to point out that Active Directory is a powerful tool that you want to be trained on before you go and try to get a job as a technician, just because it's going to be in your interview. If you have a Windows server, they will hire the person that is Active Directory trained or certified or experienced before they hire somebody that is not, only because it is so important. And it is a critical skill that you will want to know as a technician. You don't need to know deep details as for the A+ certification, but you absolutely need to know what Active Directory is and have an idea what to use it for. Someday I might make a video on it. I've been through the training. I understand what Active Directory is. I haven't made a video because I haven't taught the class that I went through to learn Active Directory, but I absolutely understand the concepts. We could spend another 3 hours on Active Directory, and I'm not going to do that right now. But I do encourage you to go watch a YouTube video on Active Directory just to get a better understanding how to go about creating, adding, using, deleting new users, giving permissions and removing them. You can pick one or more videos and it'll do a great job giving you an introduction to Active Directory. And another part of Active Directory is setting local and group policies that can be applied at the domain level, the group policy, and or at a local level through a local security policy on individual computers per se. Permissions control what can or cannot be done, permit or deny access to files, folders, and devices from remote locations, for example. Network administrators and end users can set permissions on folders, and these permissions can affect another user's access to the files and folders. So you might have a permission to read a file, but not have a permission to delete it, for example, or to make any changes to it. Too bad for my pay. I would definitely double my pay, but somebody would probably notice. Anyways, two types of permissions that can be assigned in Windows. Share permissions. Share permissions provide and or limit access to data across a network. They are the only way to secure network resources on FAT16 and FAT32 devices, such as your USB drives. NTFS permissions provide tighter control than shared folder permissions and can be used only on NTFS drives. Those kind of make sense. Actually, hard drives can be FAT32. It's not the newest standard. We talked about hard drive in the hard drive class, if you remember. Here, they talk about folder options in your Windows computer. This is not Active Directory. This is just talking about going in to your Windows Explorer and showing or hiding specific files and folders. And you can also control what shows. For example, you may want the what's it called? Hang on. I forgot the word file extensions, but you can, for example, hide file extensions, or you can show file extensions. I like seeing .exe or .bat or .text or .pdf. I like seeing what kind of file it is, not guessing what type of file it is. So I always show those extensions, and you can control that inside of your folder options. But do not use this for security. If you hide your file, let's say you go to a folder and you hide the folder, To unhide the folder, somebody just has to open up that folder, the folder options window, and show folders, right? And then they can see the folders and they can unhide it and then they can go into it. So it is not a security feature. It is just something, perhaps you want to hide the folder with all the drives, that all the updated drives for your installed hardware, all of the device drivers, and then hide it, right? If somebody opens and unhides that, it's not a big deal. But you want to hide it so that it isn't just clicked on and deleted accidentally. That's folder options, protecting the operating system and data. That might be something you hide, for example. Several chapters have contained important security related tips, steps, and information related to protecting the operating system and the data. Items that pertain specifically to security of the operating system and data use NTFS filing system, at least until the newest filing system is released. Ensure that operating systems and application service packs and updates are applied regularly. That's just good patch management. And previously, I showed you how easy that is in Windows, just to go to the Windows setting for updates and set it to update automatically. And have an alternate boot source, such as an optical disk. Today, we use flash drives or another hard drive and another operating system perhaps installed on it, and have your operating system installed on the flash drive so that if you can't get to the boot drive for the computer, you can still access it through another alternate boot source. When you're troubleshooting, it's great to carry that USB drive that can access a computer, because you don't know what you're going to find when you get there. And you might find, I'm not saying install a new operating system, I'm saying just access the computer through the operating system that's on the USB drive. When you're protecting the operating system, make sure you install antivirus software and make sure the latest virus definitions have been installed and that they update on a regular basis. Encrypt data that needs to be protected. Optionally place operating system files and data files on separate hard drive partitions. I do that myself. I actually have two different hard drives. The C drive has all of my Windows files and the programs that run on my computer. The data files, including all files that I create, even a Word document, all the way to the videos I create to put on YouTube, are all stored on a hard drive, a different hard drive, the D drive. That way, if the C, and that's backed up, I don't back up the C drive, because the C drive, if it goes bad, I just reinstall Windows and the programs that I want. But I don't ever want to recreate these videos if I don't have to. Some firmware or driver versions may cause security issues. Keep the versions updated. They change. There's always bad guys, threat actors trying to hack firmware and drivers. Many updates to your operating system and the programs that run on your computer are just to patch vulnerabilities that have been exploited by the bad guys. If using virtualization, don't forget that each virtual machine needs the same protection as the individual computer. If the computer you use does not have share files or printer with others on the network, use the network and sharing center control panel and disable file and share. If you're not sharing files and printers, there's no reason to have that available. Just shut it off. To create a shared folder that is not seen by any other sources across the network, add a $ to the end of the share name. Might be something to make a note of for an exam. Use the system restore program to control restore points. I always like setting a restore point anytime I install new hardware or software. That way, if it goes awry, I can always just step backwards. Just disable ports through the system BIOS or UEFI. I already mentioned that. Those back USB ports do not need, the open ones that aren't connected to the network, do not need to be just freely open. Someday you might find a USB drive back there with a keylogger. Backup and restore. Backup data routinely and test the backups. There's nothing worse than having a backup that you can't install. Trust me, that tape backup experience I had back in the 90s, where I backed up to a tape backup, I was I was religious about doing it. I did it on a monthly or semi-monthly time frame. Then when I had a problem, I couldn't get anything off the tape backup. It was disappointing. Local storage, CDs, DVDs, BD, Blu-ray devices, flash drives, external drives. Advantages, control the security and the cost. Disadvantages, they must store and maintain the media. So what they're saying there is if you use any of those devices to make a backup, you have to store the Blu-ray drive or the USB drive or an external hard drive. And it must be stored in a different location, because if it's stored in the same location, and say your company gets blown down in a hurricane, well, guess what? All your backups are blown down too. So you need to make sure you store those devices remotely, or you can go cloud storage. It can be free or for a charge. If you're at a corporation, nothing's free. There'll be a cost. Security, but maybe for your home, you can get maybe 500 megabytes for free. I know Microsoft Office comes with Office 365 comes with 1 terabyte of storage. That might be enough for many users. It's not enough for me. I store more than half of that on my USB drive, just the stuff I use. Cloud storage can be free. Oh, I read that. Security is a concern for cloud storage. Cloud storage is basically just storing it on somebody else's network. It's on somebody else's network. That means if somebody has access, if they have poor security on the network, on the other computer that you're storing the information on, then your information is compromised or can be compromised. And restoration requires connectivity to the cloud. So if you've lost your network, your internet, you're not just downloading it because you don't have a connection to the internet. You have to wait until your connection's back up. I'm thinking hurricane, right? It didn't take out everything, but it took down your network. Some of your data was lost. You go to reinstall it and you don't have an internet connection, you can't reinstall it. Auto run and autoplay. Disable auto run to prevent software from automatically starting from an optical disk, flash drive, or external drive. Autoplay is how a music or movie disc will automatically start playing as soon as it is inserted. Use gpedit.msc, administrative templates, Windows component, and then auto policies to disable it. Mechanical hard drives. This is a little overkill, but depending on what you put on the hard drive, putting one drill through a hard drive will pretty much make it unusable. But there are still ones and zeros on that mechanical drive. You did not damage the entire drive. You just damaged that one place where the holes are. So if somebody really wanted to access highly sensitive data, using a drive wipe program is not good enough. And even a low-level format could be useful, but maybe not. SDelete utility from Microsoft will delete without it being recoverable. And the format and cipher commands also help you to format the drive. Ultimately, for sensitive data, drilling a hole through one, let's just look at this one, right? They have a template and they drill a lot of holes. Now you are not getting anything off of this drive. Absolutely not getting anything off that drive, but it's also going to take you the time to drill that many holes through a hard drive. So you got to use that if necessary, but probably not necessary. You can use the gauzing. There are machines that are destruction machines that will destroy the hard drive so that it isn't capable of having any information off of it. All overkill. Just use a sledgehammer. No, that's not a good idea. But a sledgehammer has been used in the past, I promise you. Internet security. No system should connect to the internet without antivirus and anti-malware software installed. Pay attention to the security alerts provided by antivirus and anti-malware software, browser applications, and operating system. If the operating system is telling you on a daily basis that it's time for you to install a program, and it's a different program every day, and you don't recognize the program that's telling you to install a program, there's a good chance that you've already been compromised. My wife's phone right now, every time she turns on her phone, it offers to install a program. Actually, it just starts installing a program. So her phone definitely has some malware on it, and I haven't gotten a chance to look at it, but who knows what I'm going to have to do to get that off of her phone. Same thing can happen with a computer, obviously. For anti-malware, Microsoft provides free malicious software removal tool through the Windows 7 update. I have used that, and it was successful to an extent. It left the virus on the boot sector, and so it removed the virus. And then when I turned the computer back on again, it reinstalled the virus. Microsoft 7, 8, and 10 come with Windows Defender. Windows 11 doesn't call it Windows Defender anymore. Windows 11 calls it Windows Defender. It calls it, not that you need to know, but it does call it Windows Defender. But it's found through Windows Security and something else, Windows Security features, I think, something like that. But it is still called Windows Defender. So I am, yeah, let me make sure. It's called Virus and Internet Protection instead of Windows Defender. When you open that up, it goes specifically into many different aspects. I think I could put this on your computer on my side here. Hopefully I can. Basically telling me when it ran a threat, it found no threats, how many files were scanned, and I can control when it will run again. So I have it on a schedule to run on a regular basis. I also have a habit of running my virus software, that virus software, anytime I install any new software on my computer, just make sure that software is clean. Internet security continued. Microsoft Security Baseline Analyzer. I got a little picture of their icon. Identify security misconfigurations on computers, something you might want to run once you've set security. Configure your browser to display a security warning or that you are asked or warned of potential security threats. And Windows Defender can be customized as to when to run, when to update, and how often it scans the computer. Malware removal. The trick is to not get malware, not get a virus, because getting rid of it is never fun. Identify the malware symptoms and log all actions you perform. Quarantine the infected system files if you have software running on your computer. Disconnect it from the network because it can spread into other network connected devices. Do not power off or reboot the computer. Notify the appropriate personnel per security policy, or whatever they say. Who to get a hold of is probably more important than how. For Windows computers, disable system restore so that it doesn't get wiped. And that's something that's a trick of malware and viruses. They will erase all of the system restore points so that you can't go backwards. Remediate the infected system to get rid of it. Schedule an antivirus, anti-malware scan and run updates. For Windows computer, re-enable the system restore and create a new clean restore point. And then educate the user on what they did. This is something you're going to be doing on a regular basis. As a technician, you are going to be cleaning people's computers. I'd like to just recommend a program I like. I use it all the time. It's Glary, Glary. Glary is a program that I've used on my computer for a long period of time, especially for your home computer. Glary Utilities. It's a program that I believe I've actually paid for. I like it so much. No, I don't know. No, I guess I still use the private version. But basically, it's one-click maintenance. This is a quick and easy software to put on your user computers if you're helping individuals. This isn't necessarily something you want to be the main program on a company's website, but to put it on a fellow user's computer that is always getting malware, always getting viruses. This builds in a lot of advanced tools, including malware, virus checks, system backups, and deleting. So I'll let you guys go take a look at it. Glary Utilities, and there's a free version for home use. That's a little extra for you guys. DNS issues. DNS translates URLs to an IP address. So you go from cisco.com to 208.67.222, etc. If the browser is redirected to an unusual website, change the DNS configuration to another DNS server. OpenDNS is relatively new. It's free, and you can set your DNS server to this OpenDNS, which is actively monitored. So you're not getting hacked if you use one of these DNS servers. You can do this at your home. Clear the browser history cache, clear the DNS cache using ipconfig and flush DNS. Restart your computer, restart the router, and you're up and running. Proxy servers acts as an agent between the application, such as a web server and a remote server, can use to cache frequently accessed web pages for speedier access. I like to explain this as when you go to donlafon.com, it takes forever to get there. Why? Because it's not on your ISP's DNS server. But once it gets to the top level domain for .com, finds my IP address and delivers the website to you, then it goes on the top level. It goes on the DNS server. So then, even if it's just your ISPs, then just search for donlafon.com again, and it goes right there. Why? Because it's cached by the DNS server, the proxy server, so that you are able to get to that data quickly. There's a lot in this presentation. I really should have broken it into two. Hopefully you're just hitting pause, or you hit pause and you've come back to it. I apologize. I did not realize this is going to be 2 hours. NAT, it's how private addresses remain private and public. You only have one public address on your home computer. The college I teach at actually has 5 IP addresses, and those 5 IP addresses are how the world interacts with the college, and everything behind those 5 IP addresses, everything behind the edge routers all have private addresses in the range of 192.168, 172.16, or 10. anything. Those are the private ranges that you can use. You're free to use any of those ranges in any manner that you want. If you're using the 10 network, you can set it up to have millions of addresses. The 192.168 can have 256 addresses, and 172.16 can have 65,000 subnets of 65,000 addresses if you wanted to have 65,000 plus. I never remember the last 3 numbers. That 10 is millions of addresses. But you can also format a 10 address to only have 256. If I said 365 earlier, I apologize. It's been a long presentation. 256 addresses on the 192.168, but you can configure 172 and 10 dot whatever to 256 based on the subnet mask. That's a little hint for when you take my Cisco class down the road, all right, or when you go watch my videos. There are 3 remote access protocols. There's RDP, that's remote desktop protocol, creates a peer-to-peer remote desktop connection from one computer to a remote computer. You might have to enable port forwarding. See chapter 13 networking on that, and allow port 3389 to allow for remote desktop. Security concern is somebody might use that to access your computer as a bad actor. So if you don't leave it open, don't leave that port open, because it would be on the threat report if you've had somebody doing a pen test of your network. SSH and Telnet, that's how you can remote into a remote network. SSH is secure, and you control the level of security, 512, 1024, 2048. The higher security is a bigger hash, obviously, and takes a lot longer for the CPU to decipher it than 512. 1024 is what they recommend at this point. Telnet, unsecure. So if you're typing a password and a username and a password on a Telnet connection is unsecure, somebody running Wireshark or a similar device sniffing packets can see everything you type. Make sure it's clear text. Make sure that you're not using Telnet unless you absolutely have to. Internet appliances, endpoint management server to discover and manage devices, an IDS, which is intrusion detection system. It detects passively for malicious traffic. IPS, intrusion prevention. It stops people from accessing the equipment. Usually does it with sockets. It, for example, will stop the ports, remote access attempts to your equipment. UTM, unidentified threat management. UTM provides multiple security functions, including firewall and content filtering. Content filtering screens data for specific suspicious email addresses, email or files. This can stop you from getting someplace that you don't belong. It can also stop people from coming in from places that don't belong on your network. Mobile device management, MDM, used to view and manage mobile devices. Simple MDM policies include software, firmware installation, security updates, backup processes, VPN, connectivity, password storage, how to report lost or stolen devices. Basically, it's a high-level management tool to control all of this. It has to be part of your policy. You need to follow policy. When something goes awry, there has to be procedures that your people follow to help secure and to mitigate the damages. Wireless security, make sure you're using the right level of security. WEP, we don't use it anymore. And then it goes from there to more secure. WPS, we don't use anymore. And you want WPA2. It's the most common today, but WPA3 is making its inroads, which is more secure than WPA2. AES stands for Advanced Encryption Service or Standards. AES is the way WPA2 works. Again, deeper than you need to know, but it wouldn't hurt to find out what kind of encryption is on your computers and make sure you have the most secure system you can. Did I miss something? Right here, they're just showing you you're signing in. It's telling you what your encryption standard you're using. Wireless security, MAC address filtering. Manually enter MAC addresses of any wireless device allowed on the wireless network, or at least use something called sticky. So the first address that you connect is entered as the MAC address. It's the only MAC address that's allowed on that port. The reason why you would want to use sticky instead of manually enter the devices. Let's say I'm outfitting a new classroom with 24 computers. I don't want to have to identify and enter 24 MAC addresses. As soon as I plug the RJ45 port into the port on the back of the computer, if it's connected to the switch, the switch registers the MAC address and stores it in the running configuration file, and then you save that running configuration as the startup configuration, and then you're done. A whole lot easier than manually entering it, but manually entering is possible. Beware of AP default settings. Change as soon as you configure for the first time. That is, we're talking about adding an access port, and the access port password is usually admin admin, depending on what piece of equipment you have. Don't leave it that way. Otherwise, some bad actor can try to access your AP and make changes or try to infiltrate your system through that AP. SSID broadcasting, it basically tells you the name of the network that is out there. They say you disabling it really isn't a great idea. It isn't a good security measure because there are tools out there by bad actors which will find the names of SSIDs that are currently in the wireless range. So it doesn't really help security. It only bothers the people trying to legitimately get onto the network. You must manually configure. You need to know the name of the network, the wireless network, and it has to be spelled correctly, and capitalization matters. So it ends up being a problem. Oh, almost done. Security incident reporting. So identify the issue. When you have a problem, identify the issues. That a virus, spyware, grayware, phishing, child exploitation, or software piracy. What is it? Report the issue through the proper channels based on your corporate policy. Preserve the data device by documenting the incident. Use chain of custody form that travels with the device and report the incident to your supervisor. So an example of this is, let's say you're a technician and you are formatting the equipment in a lab that is rarely used, and you go to a computer, and on that computer is some pornography, for example, and you need to report that. You need to identify the equipment, where it was, when it was found, when it was identified, use the documentation that your company uses, and then take the equipment and the documentation and report it to your supervisor or to the IT department, if you're not the IT department, and then let them deal with the issue unless you're responsible for it. And then you'll have training to know exactly what to do to figure out who signed into that computer on the last. Just because by the way, just because somebody signed into the computer does not mean that they were the ones that did the bad thing. It just means that they were the ones that signed in. Maybe they didn't sign out when they left the office and left the room, and somebody else signed in with their access, started using their access, right? So you really have to track where the person was, who was in the room. That's the kind of thing that takes an investigation. And you're not going to do that when you first see the security incident. You're going to have to pass that along, and it will have to be investigated at a higher level with probably multiple people. Wow, that's a lot of terms. 2-hour presentation. I apologize for that. If I had realized it was going to be 2 hours, I would have cut that thing in half, and I didn't. So hopefully you hit pause halfway through, ate lunch, and came back for the evening shift, because that was a long presentation. Hopefully it was helpful. A lot of good terms in there, a lot of testable material. So hopefully it is helpful to you. And if you made it all the way through, thank you. Anyways, Complete A+ Guide to IT Hardware and Software. That's the book it comes from. It's getting you ready for the CompTIA A+ 220, 1001, and 1002 separate tests. Those exams expire at the end of this year in 2022. You'll have new exams in 2023. So make sure you take this test this year before they expire. And that is the end of my presentation with a black screen. How perfect. So I think my beard has grown during that presentation. We've been on here so long. Hopefully it's helpful. I apologize for it taking so long. I really would have made 2 videos if I had realized it. And I'm not just going to break it in half. You can control when you watch the video, but I will, I think the next time through, when I do the A+ for the next A+ certification, when I make my videos for the next exam cycle, I'll make it 2 for security. There's a lot to know, there's a lot to understand. Any term you don't know, if you're look in the book. If you don't have the book, I have it sitting right next to me. If you don't have the book, what you want to do is you want to Google it, right? YouTube it, learn about it, learn the topic, get a firm, uh, but not in-depth knowledge about every one of these terms. Understand what it is. I'll tell you a hint. If you stayed this long, you deserve it. The A plus certification is full of a lot of acronyms. If you know what the acronym stands for, then you're able to know a lot of times what its purpose is, right? So IDS compared to um, IPS, right? Knowing the difference is the difference in getting that question right or wrong, right? D stands for detection, P stands for prevention. So you need to know the term. You don't actually know how to configure an IDS or an IPS. Just have to know what it is and what it does. So A plus is entry level, and you'll learn much deeper depending on which way you go once you pass your A plus certification and you move on to other certifications. It's been my pleasure. I'm tired, but it's been my pleasure making this video. Hopefully it was helpful for you. If it has been, please hit that like and please make a comment down below. You can even say it's too long. It's okay. If you made it through, I appreciate it. If let me know when you pass your A plus certification. Let me know if you have comments. Say nice things. It's okay. Down below, I appreciate it. Ask questions too. That's if you're out on YouTube. If you're in Netacad, I'm sorry, in Canvas, ask your questions inside the help discussion forums, and I'll do my best to answer those. And your fellow students will too. Anyway, thank you so much for coming to class. It's been a long one, but hopefully it's been helpful.